All right, welcome everybody. Happy to have you with us, broadcasting to you live from the estate property here at Page Spring Cellars. Here with Eric Glomski. We're going to give everyone just about 2 minutes to join in. So, yeah, and everything's looking good. What's new, man?
Gosh, I don't know where to begin. A lot of things. One really cool thing is a good buddy of mine, Michael Bassler, he's with North Berkeley Imports. And basically, he's a Burgundy guy, among other things, and he dropped in a little unexpectedly last night. So I had the pleasure of drinking some great white Burgundies, classic Chardonnays, Grand Cru, old line stuff. We also had a wonderful bottle of champagne, and we also drank some classic Pinot Noirs from Chevry, Chambertin, and all over Burgundy basically. So I'm maybe dragging just a little bit today.
Well,
how about you?
I mean, this place has such a demand, that I'm dragging a little bit as well. But outside of work, just been hanging with my kids, and
he has the cutest girls in the world.
They're pretty damn cute. Yeah. I basically am working till around 5 every day, and then it's head straight out the door the second I clock out. And we've been swimming a lot. Just made it out to Sycamore Canyon for the first time with them. And Shiloh did the entire hike.
Nice.
My 5-year-old's daughter did a 2-mile hike into the swimming hole and a 2-mile hike out. And really, it was the last just climb out of the canyon where she was like, will you carry me? And I was
how old is she
no.
now?
She's 5.5. Awesome. Yeah, so she did a 4-mile hike.
Good for her, man.
She's a
little machine, though.
She is a tank. She is a tank. So I'm back to those wines, man. It sounds like
the cool thing is this guy he's such a natural. He's so passionate. He knows all the families really well. So when he shares a wine with you, it's not mechanical at all. It's classic European. It's like he tells you stories about the people and their farming, and most of these places he represents are 5th to 20th generation winemakers. He's like, yeah, these guys have been farming this property 500 years. I'm like, oh yeah, well I've been farming mine for 15.
Do you have a standout specific label from that experience?
It's interesting because our distributor Quail, his portfolio is carried by them in Arizona.
Yeah.
And I met him at one of the tastings, and there's this producer called Jean Vassal, and it's a champagne, and it's almost all Pinot Noir, and it was just rich and sublime and nutty, and that was definitely, it was hard. It's hard to nail one down, but it was really good. Yeah. And you can get it from Quail. I don't know where they sell it to for people to get it, but I'm sure it's got to be out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm jealous. I'm sad I missed out, man, but happy that you got that experience. I'm sure they're incredible.
He's on his way he's coming back from Santa Fe. He's in a band too, and he plays music all over the place. Of course, they haven't been doing that, but he was out visiting some people in Santa Fe, and he lives in Newport Beach.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. I had a Chablis about a week ago I probably didn't stand up to what you were drinking, but it was a very special wine that I drank, and it
a lot of people
kind of stirred the pot for me a little bit with some senses, because that region I'm not drinking too often, and yeah.
A lot of people don't even know that Chablis is Chardonnay and kind of basically part of Burgundy.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people don't know Beaujolais is part of Burgundy.
Yeah, totally.
Kind of interesting.
You ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Well, welcome everybody. We are tuning in live from Page Spring Cellars, the estate property. We are here in our massage sala, which some of you are maybe aware of and some aren't. This is one of the more recent additions to us as a whole. So on top of our tasting room, on top of our tours, on top of our private events, we do have a massage department here as well, with a designated space, which we are coming to you live from. The massage sala is a really special little location down here. It's very intimate. It is a building that is literally straddling part of the main spring of Page Springs. There is actually a little portal in the wall where you can open it up and expose the spring, and that's usually more of the sound that kind of fills the room. And one of the other coolest parts about this space is the view. There is just this beautiful picture window showcasing our home vineyard.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look out here, right in the foreground, you'll see the remnants of the very first vines ever planted in Arizona. So this is Syrah 383, came from southern France. Beyond it, though, you'll also notice that there's a bunch of new vines, or you won't at least see big vines. Last year, we planted this out, and unfortunately, a fall frost wiped out every new vine. So now we're planting Aglianico, and we also have Claret Blanche. Aglianico is a grape from southern Italy, from Campania, and Claret Blanche is another white grape from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So unfortunately, the Marcelin and Montepulciano we put in is all pretty much died, and it's just one of the risks of farming.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bittersweet, right? Because we aren't going to get to drink that for a while, but when that time comes, it's going to be worth it, you know? So it's just a matter of that long-term perspective versus, what's happening right now.
And the reason we planted those different grapes is we couldn't get Montepulciano and Marcelin again.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would have lost yet another year waiting for a nursery to create those for us. So Corey and I combed through everything that was available, and we're like, well, we've always wanted to work with these other two grapes, so let's go for it.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah. So maybe just a touch more about the massage department here, and feel free to jump in at any time. This department focuses on individual and couples massage, a number of different forms of types of massage. The department is run by Gail Glomski, Eric's partner, and she specializes in Thai massage. The massages, I believe, are typically 60 to 90 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, I can add a little bit.
Yeah.
I think one of the cool things, number one, we already have a really beautiful place. We have the river, we have amazing food, we have amazing wine. Add this on, and I think especially for couples is one of the most special parts of this, because you can come here with your partner and get massaged side by side. And Gail has all these really cool packages that are paired with, you do your massage and then you get some nice bubbly afterward and a little bit of food. And you can have this whole experience around a massage, which is really cool.
Yeah, our massage department does offer packages, unique packages per month. There are some packages that are available seasonally or throughout the year, and they include everything from champagne to food items, wine, and one of the cooler items that could potentially be included in your package are custom produced body butters that Gail Glomski is heading up the production of. Do you maybe want to touch on
that? One of the, you'll talk about our green ethics later, but one of the things we're constantly doing is, okay, how do we reuse? How do we recycle? How do we, we have a waste stream here, and whenever you can turn a waste stream into something usable, it's amazing. So Gail actually kind of spent a ton of time experimenting with our pomace, or the dried grape skins after we're done fermenting. And she experimented and grinds them down into a fine powder. And grapes are loaded with all kinds of antioxidants, resveratrol, all kinds of things that are really good for your health. And she works them and makes them into these body butters that you can kind of upgrade a massage and get massaged with this great body butter too. She also sells them to go, and she makes lip balms as well. And she makes some culinary powders out of it too that you can actually shake on. We're going to be working them into our menu as well.
Yeah.
So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, good taste across the board. I always feel like, wine isn't necessarily our mission as for what we provide to our guests, and good taste to me kind of is.
Yeah.
So.
And whenever you can turn something that would have basically been thrown away into something amazing.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, that's huge. Anybody interested in more information about Page Springs Massage, check us out on our website, pagespringscellars.com. Under our visit tab is where you're going to find information on our massage offerings. Included in that is also yoga classes and some hoop dancing. Yeah, which I don't know.
It's a blast. People have so much fun. You don't ever think about, I'm going to go learn how to hula hoop. But every time I see a group doing that with Gail, it's like one of the coolest things. Everybody's laughing and smiling, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on. Again, broadcasting live from Page Springs Cellars. We are a family-owned and operated winery here in Cornville, Arizona, which sits directly in between Cottonwood and Sedona in kind of central to northern Arizona. A really special place that has a lot going on. We're a farm. We are an estate property with trails that connect into a local birding area. We are producing all of our wines here. We are serving and selling the majority of our wines here, with a little bit of distribution happening as well. Any other?
And we don't distribute outside of Arizona anymore. Early on we did, but there's such a demand, and we can only make so much wine, so it's all 100% Arizona. I'm really proud to be a truly local winery.
Yeah.
And we've evolved a lot, and truly I think the most concise thing about this place is that we're a true wine country experience.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fully integrated from grape all the way to your mouth, and then everything from enjoying food here, getting massages, wandering around the property, the vineyards. Oak Creek flows through our land. I mean, you could spend a whole day here doing stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody who don't happen to know either of us, my name is Luke Bernard, and I have been working here at Page Spring Cellars for about 8.5 years or so. I manage our marketing world. I also do all of our graphic design, and I do a lot of our face-to-face communication, public relations, and that kind of world. I work part-time on our winemaking team. I've also worked in most of the departments that are here at Page Spring, so I at least you might find me in the tasting room or somewhere.
We tried to make
else.
sure Luke never got complacent or bored.
Thanks, Ed.
You have like maybe 2 jobs left in the company you haven't done.
Yeah, I'm coming for yours next time. I moved to Arizona about 10 years ago and just immediately got pulled into the wine industry out here. Born and raised in Virginia. I went to college in Asheville, North Carolina. Did not study wine, but definitely had an appreciation for it. Ended up moving out to this area to have kids, which I have 2 now, and ended up finding my way into vineyard work immediately. And here I am now, which I'm happy to be here. And I'm sitting alongside Eric Glomski.
Thanks, man. A lot of you know something about me. I was actually born in the Chicago area, and my parents were quite young when they had me, 17 and 18. I think it might have been illegal. When my dad finished grad school, we moved to Boston. So I basically, at 7 years old, left Chicago, moved to Boston, grew up there, spent a couple years touring with the Grateful Dead, seeing the country, and I landed in Prescott, Arizona, to go to college. So, and I just totally fell in love with the Southwest. I mean, I pretty much, when I got here, I was like, this is my home. I love New England. I miss it in the fall.
Yeah.
But this has always felt like home to me ever since I've been here. And so I basically went to college here. I actually started grad school while I was getting the wine bug. And I was just working on my graduate thesis beginnings when I got a job offer in California at a winery, because I had volunteered there previously. So that was David Bruce. I moved out there. I had actually done a small stint in Sonoma at this place called Limerick Lane. Then I spent 6 years at David Bruce learning how to make Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Met a guy named John Marcus at a show out there. Turns out he was one of Dr. Kevorkian's attorneys and done a bunch of legal work. He's also a linebacker from Michigan State. He's a big guy. And he said, I planted vineyards in the Sedona area. And I was like, I've been trying to figure out a way to get back there. So I left the Santa Cruz Mountains. I helped John make his first couple of vintages. And then just down the road from John Marcus, this land came up for sale that we're on right now. So the rest, that was 2003, end of 2003, early 2004, we closed on the land, and the rest is history.
It's amazing timing, man. And with the economic collapse that happened right after that, I mean, was that a big hurdle for you?
Strange.
That was before I was here.
It was actually, it's funny that you asked that. It actually ended up being an incredible opportunity for me, because right before the crash, of course, there was an artificially inflated market, the housing market. I was my house, which I basically consider a piece of junk, appraised for like 3 times what I thought it was worth. So I borrowed against it, and I bought out one of our early partners. So that whole thing, and then even though it crashed after that, and I was upside down on my mortgage, the company was cranking enough that we always paid our bills and we kept growing. So it actually ended up working out great for me, and I ended up owning, the largest share in my own company because I was your typical young guy who had no money. So I was all sweat equity. I was able to refinance my house, take that money, buy somebody out, and it was pretty cool actually.
Yeah. Well, we'll see about this next round of economic shift.
We're coming out of it, I think, right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hey, quick shout out to Corey Turnbull turning in. He must have figured out how to work his phone, Happy to have you, bud. That is our winemaker joining us from wherever he may be.
In his new home.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'd love to jump into these wines here. Maybe before we get into our sensory evaluation, what's going on with COVID times and open versus reopen? And
I'm glad you asked. So, just so everybody knows, we are officially open again, but we're at partial capacity. So we basically moved half the tables out of our lounge and kind of tasting room. We also didn't open the bar because there's really no way for us to maintain social distancing at a bar. But we've got a bunch of seating. We're doing tastings again. We have full menu going. We've also kept the to-go window open so that you can get wine, food to go, a more limited menu than in the main dining room.
Yeah.
But then we've still got our whole, multiple acre property for you to go out and enjoy. Having said that, we're following CDC guidelines as we should. All of our staff are wearing masks, gloves. We're regularly changing gloves. We're sanitizing all surfaces. We've got iPads for people to sign off on. Those are getting sanitized every time. We've got markers on the ground for the lines, all the stuff you've been seeing everywhere else. And, it makes it a kind of a creepy experience in Safeway, but I think it actually feels pretty good here. It's working,
Yeah.
So, as you'd expect, we're doing our best there. And the great thing is that Arizona is relatively low risk, and I think we're going to come out of this pretty strong.
Yeah. Well, we did, again, just to reiterate, we did just reopen this past Monday with the restrictions in place. And
Phase one.
Yeah, it's nice to see people back on the property and respecting the rules and respecting people's space. And that's the step we want to be taking right now, and it's in the right direction. So
and the vibe here is great. Like I would actually say, walking around here right now, there's a respectful vibe between people, but it's also really laid back. It's not that intense kind of I'm in Walmart right now and everybody's freaked out kind of feeling,
Right,
it's really laid back. It's great.
So let's just bring up what we are drinking here, you guys. We have two different wines we are going to be tasting through. One's white, one is red. If you guys don't happen to have your white chilled, maybe drinking it unchilled would be the right move at this point. And
I would actually say of any of our whites, this is one that can probably, it can be a little warmer. It just gets a little more expressive. It just, it's okay.
Right. So just to show you guys what we are drinking here, it kind of blocks us out, but we do have the La Serrana from 2018, as well as our 2017 El Serrano.
Trying to do, how can I just have my head?
If we both just like grab that.
You're right. Pour it in.
Yeah, so let's jump into these wines.
All right.
Now, you want to tell us what we're drinking first?
Yeah, so for kind of natural reasons, we're going to go white first, and then we'll do red next. So La Serrana first, and then El Serrano, and this is a classic Southern Rhone blend of Viognier and Roussanne. Basically, when you think about it, Viognier is, classically aromatic, and sometimes it can be almost too over the top by itself, at least for me. The neat thing is I think Roussanne brings a lot of elegance to the blend. Roussanne is generally not as perfumey as Viognier, but it has good structure using more acidity, and it has this great underlying pear and minerality. This, basically the Viogniers, we don't grow Viognier anymore. We used to, but it's really early and it tends to get frosted. So these Viogniers came from two vineyards in Wilcox, and the Roussanne came from our estate, and both Dos Padres and Colibri. So quick story, Bob.
Yeah, cool. These wines have been around as long as I've been around here, and they seem to be some of the bigger staples to our wine production world.
Yeah, I think we've referred to these as our flagship red and white before too.
Yeah, and you'll hear signature wines. You'll hear the Vino della Familia's mentioned, the Vino del Barrio's mentioned. I do feel like flagship is the right term for this set of wines. It really represents us and our Arizona kind of wrapped up and Page Springs wrapped up. So let's get into our little evaluation of this. I'm happy to kind of take the sensory evaluation and we'll run from there. Visually, full clarity, beautiful color, has a little bit of age on it, a little honeyed color, but not much aging.
This is our 18, right?
This is the 18 La Serrana, yeah. I would say right off the bat, I'm getting a bit of this lemon peel that transitions into this kind of lemon cake, a little bit of the shortbread side. I find a bit of a nutty characteristic there, like a almond sliver. A touch of like a toasted oat, honey, and now that I'm saying that, like a honey bunches of oats, the cereal my kids are always open. I'm getting a little bit of that.
There's a neat little minerality, like hint of baking soda and like crushed stone in there too. That's really nice.
Yeah, a touch of like a little limestone.
Mm-hmm.
Nice pear. You mentioned pear earlier. Absolutely.
Classic Roussan character, especially from Calibri.
And then maybe give it a swirl. You'll get a lot more out of your aromatics the more you do that.
Shake.
So
for those of you who are brave, okay, that really gets it. The best part is, of course, that. And then that really gets the aromatics into the glass. Woo! As I told you guys before, too, if for some reason you're not getting a lot of aromatics, number one, check to make sure it's not too cold, right? If you just took this out of the fridge and it's ice cold, it'll usually tighten up the aromatics a little. The other thing you can do is just smell your own arm or wrist, and that resets your background, and then go back in. It can really enhance your smelling experience.
Yeah, going back to it, I'm getting this like pixie stick, sweet tart.
Like a confectioner's sugar.
Confection sugar. Oh, and starting to come out as this orange blossom, sweet, light kind of tangerine.
You know what?
I love the nose on this wine.
It's, for me, the first time I ever went to the Rome was with my brother. And my brother has a distillery in Charlottesville, Virginia called Vitae. We're going to start selling his spirits here, which is really cool. But anyway, he was living in Paris doing a postdoc on infectious diseases of all things. And we went down to the Rhone, and I had never really tried white Chateauneuf du Pape before. And that was one of the first times we're going around all these places. I'd made appointments at all the classic places, Bogstel, View Telegraph, et cetera, Gigal in the Northern Rhone. But I remember the white Chateauneufs, and we were right outside of Avignon, and Avignon's a walled city. It's called Chateauneuf du Pape because it was the other place. When things got ugly in Italy, the Pope would go hide out in Avignon, and that's why it's called Chateauneuf du Pape. It was the second home of the Pope, and it's a fortress. And I remember being there, sniffing a wine. This brings me back there. I feel like I'm up on the walls of that city overlooking Chateauneuf du Pape. It's pretty. That's what's going on for me with this.
Hopefully I'll make it there one day.
That's one of the things I love about wine,
though.
Its ability to transport you.
Yeah.
And I echo all the things you're saying about it. I think this wine's amazingly complex, and I think as it warms up in your glass, you get new stuff out of it.
Yeah, I also find with this wine a meeting of both worlds. It has this light, fresh fruitiness, but it also has this round richness, so that the acidity still shows bright, but without confining this wine to a lighter aromatic driven wine.
And what I add is just that what that says to me, which is what I think about this wine, that's about balance. This wine actually has a really low pH and a fair amount of acidity, but it doesn't come across as really tart or acidic, which I like sometimes because it also has a lot of richness. So it's got this great balance of here's your acid, and it's got this fatness around it that kind of buffers it and allows it to be more acidic without seeming astringent, you know?
Right.
And I think that's one of the really cool things about this wine. Little bit of oak influence, you know, some of the notes that you just shared with everybody clearly says to me, oh, this wine was at least part, if not wholly barrel aged, which it was, neutral oak.
Yeah.
And that helps soften and round it out too.
Yeah. And for you guys at home, this is a wine that lived it was fermented in stainless steel. It stayed in stainless steel for about 7 to 8 months, and then it got moved to neutral oak for the remaining 4 months or so before going to bottle. And it is 54% Viognier and 46% Roussanne. Is that, I know the answer, but for these guys at home, is that in line with past vintages and what's coming for the following vintage?
I mean, the blend has evolved since we first made it a couple years after we opened. We made the red, which we'll taste in a minute first. And actually, that's true of all of our blends, the Barrios, the Familias, and the Serrano. The reds all came first, and then 1 or 2 years, 3 years down the road, we started making the counterpart. Having said that, this started off as 100% Viognier, and then we because we couldn't get Roussanne, and I always wanted to make a more classic Chateauneuf blend. Like I tried down there.
Yeah.
Well, then all of a sudden, our industry expanded. People started planting. We planted more, and so invariably, this has been now it's always Viognier Roussanne. Sometimes when we can get it, we've blended in Marsanne. And now we have Marsanne at Colibri, and I think our first crop of Marsanne, which is another classic white grape from the Rhone, more northerly, not way up north like Conzerou where it's all Viognier, but like kind of the middle Rhone around Hermitage, Creuse Hermitage, Saint Joseph, Cornas, they grow a lot of Marsanne, and it's the other classic fat blending grape. It usually brings this marzipan and really nutty stuff so that's going to be the next one we add.
Yeah, I feel like when you see those 3 grapes you just mentioned together, Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne, Viognier seems to be the big sibling, and then Marsanne and Roussanne, and correct me if you feel different, but I feel like you typically see those as kind of supporting cast members to Viognier when you find them in a blend.
I think in our country more, depending on where you are in the Rhone, you're going to see one or the other more dominant. Okay, so if you're way in the north in Rhone, it's all Viognier. You get way down in the south around Chateauneuf de Pape, it's a bunch of white grapes. I mean, because you also see Claret Blanche, which we just planted here, Grenache Blanc, Beurre Blanc, et cetera, et cetera. In the kind of the central Rhone, there's a lot more Roussanne, Marsanne. So, but in our country, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Viognier, there's way more plantings of Viognier in our country than Roussanne, and there's way more Roussanne than Marsanne. Hardly anybody grows Marsanne.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because it's a really pretty amazing grape.
You've already been drinking yours?
Huh? I'm almost done, man.
Let's dive into the palate on this. Hey, we only have one glass too, so we're gonna have to finish.
Yeah, this is hair of the dog for me, man. I'm still recovering from last night. This is great.
For you guys tuning in from home, we would love to get any of your tasting notes, any of your input on these.
I wonder if Terry Glomski is out there. My father just finished his WSET 3, so he's just shy of almost a master sommelier style level, and I'm just hoping he's going to be tolerable still.
Oh man, super zesty, right off the bat. Lime zest and minerality is what I'm getting. Back to that limestone. No association with the lime zest there, but those are just directly right off the front of it.
And again, if we're going to go down the parallel route of you kind of being the analytical guy and me metaphorically talking about this wine.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it more later, but this also really reminds me of the person that helped me name these wines. These are all Spanish names, right? And I'll tell the story later, but La Serrana is the girl from the mountains, right?
Yeah.
We came up with El Serrano first, the boy from the mountains, but girl from the mountains. And I didn't name these wines. A good friend of mine did. And I'm smelling this right now, and I'm remembering hanging out with her years and years ago. So, and I think we try to make wines that remind us of places, where the grapes came from, where they were made. But I also think wines, especially the sense of smell, is incredibly evocative and deep-seated in us. And if we allow it, it transports us all the time. It's pretty amazing.
Beautiful structure, awesome acid. I am getting a big persimmon note that is somewhat textural and somewhat just taste. A bit of this kind of underripe peach. I get a touch of this nuttiness on the palate, but I feel like it's a bit different than the nose where I was getting more of this kind of almond world. I feel like this is more of this walnut, pecan, kind of more savory nuttiness to it.
Mm. It's funny, I always think of walnuts on the more savory side of nuts for sure.
I still get a bit of that lemon cake, shortbread. The acid carries all the way through from start to finish. That's good.
So I'll go from my castle wall to a really awesome woman that I know from the past, and I'll add one more to my list of tasting notes, which is I remember the first time I went into a barrel cellar in the Rhone, and it was this guy named Yves Quiron, and he had been making the most amazing Viognier. So I just hunted this guy down. I'm like, hey man, I got to come and try your wines. He was the first guy I'd ever seen when we went down to the cellar. He had acacia barrels. So I came back and I was like, this guy's aging Viognier in acacia. So I went out and got a couple of acacia barrels, and we started messing around with acacia as well as oak, because almost everybody's just doing oak. So don't give me any more. I got to slow down a little bit. But anyway, the smell of a barrel room with oak is very distinctive. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into David Bruce, my first real job in the wine industry. And I'll never forget the smell of the barrels. This guy's cellar, because it had acacia, was completely different. It was like walking into a room filled with juicy fruit gum is what I remember. And this wine, this has a juicy fruit gum side to it to me that reminds me of acacia, and makes complete sense that he was aging Viognier and such in acacia, because it's akin, So it's pretty cool.
I very specifically remember the first time I smelled acacia, which was here. We were making a Viognier, acacia-aged Viognier, and I very distinctly remember the juicy fruit bubblegum smell. I also remember this kind of candied banana side, this almost like a
chip kind of thing,
like dried banana chips.
I try to never talk about bananas, because my wife hates bananas. Like, we'll put them in the house, and she'd be like, "Can you not lean the bananas on the apples, please?" I'm like, come on, really? Just a banana.
No comment, man.
What did they do to you?
What can you tell us about the history of La Serrana and El Serrano outside of what you're touching on there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just started,
including maybe label art.
Yeah, cool. I just started to talk about that a little bit. So early on, when I feel like this Arizona, especially geographically, because we're abutting Mexico, I've always felt like clearly there's a really strong Spanish influence here, and a Mexican, which is really Spaniards and native tribes intermixing, that influence has always been really present. So that's why we use a lot of Spanish names, number one. And so I was out here on this land. I made the first El Serrano, but it hadn't been named yet. It was sitting in a friend's cellar in Sonoma County. Actually, no, in Napa County, in Carneros, on the southern end. I wanted to make wines so that out there, so the second we opened our doors, I had wines to sell. I didn't want to wait, because I knew a fair amount about how to get things going financially.
Right.
And anyway, I was sitting out here. Her name's Deb Henry. She was a Spanish teacher at Yavapai College. And we were sitting out here, and I had a sample of the wine, and we were looking up at the mountains, and I was like, yeah, let's drink this wine and see if we can name it, right? And we're just chatting. And then I was talking about how our vineyard sits in the foothills of House Mountain. And she goes, and she held up the wine, and she goes, El Serrano. And I was like, what does that mean? And she goes, oh, it's the boy from the mountains, which she said is just like the foothills. The foothills are the little thing, and the mountain's the big thing. It's the boy and the man. And I was like, what an awesome name for a wine. So we named the 2003 red Mourvedre Syrah blend that I made, El Serrano. And then, so that was the boy from the mountains. And a few years later, it's like, we need to make a white counterpart, the sister. And thus came La Serrana. I called her up and I was like, is this right? La Serrana? And she's like, yeah. And so she's been kind of, and actually at the time, Chris Turner, who works with Maynard Keenan now, Chris was kind of our vineyard guy. And Chris speaks fluent Spanish. And so he was always the backup, and he was checking things like Vino del Barrio Blanca and things like that. So it was really cool. It was a neat time, exciting time, just thinking that you're naming, it's like naming your child. And 16 years later now, still has that name.
Yeah, and naming naming wines like naming your children, I can relate to. But at Page Springs, we are producing 60 plus different labels every year. So imagine having to name 60 different kids. I mean, I think you start to see us branching out.
Trying to bite back at, I was about to make a non-politically correct statement, so never mind. Let's just keep rolling.
Right.
Well, I'll talk about the label a little bit too.
Yeah, please.
Because if you look at our main label concepts, the very first one, the grape tree, and the little building next to us, the casita. It's a little picture of me leaning out with a bottle of wine and a grape tree, right?
Yep.
That was our initial label. Then I was like, well, I need some differentiation, and I want to come up with concepts that relate to each of these areas. So anything that's vineyard designated outside of the Barrio Familia Serrano world has that grape tree label still. Okay. Meanwhile, I worked with my sister-in-law. Okay. So my brother Ian, the distiller's wife, she's a great artist. She's a landscape architect and just one day on the beach, I was watching her pen and ink something. She was I think my stepdad was fishing and she pen and inked him fishing. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. It's simple and really beautiful. And I said, do you want to help me with these other concepts? So I kind of developed the concepts of the barrio, which is the idea of this neighborhood and like kids playing, old men playing chess, and all the things that you see in the barrio label. And then familia, family, that's my whole family, my wife and our 3 boys and girl, all in that concept. And then obviously El Serrano is the mountains and our stream flowing by, So, and those have held. And in fact, if you're in our lounge up here and you look up in the ceiling, we had another artist paint the 4 label concepts, the grape tree, the Barrio, Familia, and Serrano on the ceiling as well. And and obviously the only other thing, really the only other thing we've done since then is our new fruit wines, which you developed the label concept for, which are ink blots of the actual fruit that we're making those wines from.
Yeah.
So, and of course then a brandy. We're a little high functioning ADD. Oh yeah, and then there's the Glomski.
Well, I love the look of the labels, and these wines, I would say, are in-house favorites of ours, especially with our winemaking team and people who are very well versed and with our wines and have tasted them for years and years. These don't seem to waver as some of our strongest offerings that are also staple offerings, meaning that they're more readily available. The La Serrana, I believe, is only about 300 cases produced. I think it's actually
this year it was just shy of 200. But
yeah,
the other thing is that some years, because of the vintage, we might produce more, and we know how long that supply will last. So sometimes we'll produce less the next year.
Yeah.
So we try to make, because we want to release it at the right time. We don't want to have stuff around too long. We don't want to have to release it too soon. We're getting better at that over time. I think, I don't remember, but this was about 200. I mean, you have stats.
Yeah.
Actually, might even say on the label here, 190.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so it's a product of a lot of things: vintage, the availability, the quality of the components, and if 1 year is more, we'll make a little less. If 1 year is a little less, we might make a little more. But it's pretty consistent.
And for you at home, all of our labels over onto the side label will say how much of these wines we're producing. I have always loved that stat. I feel like the smaller the batch, the higher the chance of people being in tune with their production is. And I feel like when you start to look for production size on wines, you can kind of separate the more kind of mass produced wines versus smaller batch produced wines. And typically if you are seeing a case production size listed, then the producer is basically bragging about that being a smaller batch. compared to not being able to find your case count on a label means they probably wouldn't be proud to say that there's, 20,000 cases produced of that. So I feel like case count on labels is one of my ways of distinguishing kind of smaller batch wines.
Yeah, you know what? The only other thing I'd add is our labels in general, we go for 100% transparency. So if it, by law, if it's a Syrah, it only has to be 75% Syrah. So we could have 25% of something completely different in there. If it's Pinot Noir, it could be 25% Petite Syrah, and the consumer would never know because we don't have to put it. But if you look at our labels, we always put everything, maybe almost problematically at times. If there's 10 grapes that go into Vino del Barrio, we're going to put them on there.
Yep.
We're going to always have, by law, you have to have alcohol, but you only have to, we could name something as long as it's 75%, but it never made sense to me because I feel like all those things are important. Case production, the actual exact grapes that go into them. If we had enough room, and as I get older, my eyesight gets worse and worse, I'm trying to put bigger fonts on here over time. And some of these wines are really complex, and it's hard to get all that on there sometimes, So we'll see. But I'm really proud that everybody who drinks our wines can look at it and know exactly what's in there.
Yeah, I'd say that plays a huge role in explaining the language of wine as well. Most wine bottles that or especially internationally, the U.S. does a really good job of informing the consumer of what they're drinking. But when you start to dive into European wines,
German wine,
German wines. I mean, I've taken multiple classes on how to read a German wine label, and I still wouldn't feel comfortable trying to explain that.
Right.
So I love the transparency on the labels. Chateau Tumbleweed does a really great job of showing all the statistics behind it, all the different grapes, percentages, pH, processes, and so on. So don't overlook that stuff when you're assessing a label, deciding on what you want to drink. The more information on that label, the more you're going to be able to learn and associate that information with what you're drinking, and that's how you start to gain knowledge on this whole language and foreign world of wine that you have to kind of learn to speak and read. And
we'd like our labels to be educational, just like everything else we do
here. Yeah, absolutely. So what are you opening there?
El Serrano.
El Serrano.
By the way, one of the really cool things, both of these. So I heard you even say this earlier. Like, what if we get a bad bottle?
Yep.
The reality is we with these new plant-based corks, we basically don't get bad bottles anymore. I mean, it's just awesome. It's nice to know that I'm 99.9% sure that when I open this, it's not going to be messed up. So
yeah,
not bad.
It is nice. What Eric's referencing there is synthetic corks and natural corks. We are transitioning almost completely to synthetic corks, which eliminates about a 3 to 4% spoilage rate completely. So it just, when it's
kind of a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
I'm going to spend 2 years making a wine, and then I'm going to lose 3 or 4% of it. And the really, really tough thing is when you get a blatantly corked wine, it's great because then people are like, oh, this is clearly screwed up. The worst thing is when a wine's slightly corked, it just makes the wine seem listless and not a lot of aromatics. And it just makes you think that the winemaker did a lousy job.
Right.
So I'm like, I'd rather not have that problem, period. But I'd almost rather get a blatantly corked wine than a subtly corked wine because then most people don't notice it. They just think your wine isn't any good,
Absolutely.
So this wine is good.
You ever have just a bottle that's so good and it's slightly corked and you
drink it anyway?
Yeah,
all the time. Yeah.
Me too.
All the time.
Me too.
When it kills me, I don't know if, just a quick aside, David Bruce, who I used to work for, I don't know if I ever told you this, but David Bruce's Chardonnay was in the judgment of parents as well. Both bottles were kicked out that he sent, or maybe 3, because they were corked.
So it could have been David Bruce
instead of Chateau Madeleine, right?
Yeah.
And I think about, in some ways it's probably good because then who knows if I would have been able to get the job there if he was like Montelena,
Right.
But no, can you imagine that? Here's a seminal, incredibly important point in history, and you're basically left out because your wine was screwed up by a cork. That would kill me. So anyway. All right.
So jumping into our 2017 El Serrano.
God, I love this wine.
You know what we didn't do with our last.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers
you
to you guys at home. Happy to be drinking with you.
If you haven't been with us previously, the Glomski family tradition, one more time, got to look each other in the eye when you clank. Thanks. Yeah.
So, 2017 El Serrano, we're jumping back a year on vintage, and maybe with the same approach. I'll take over the kind of the sensory world, and you can tangent off of that. While I'm attempting to assess this, do you maybe want to say something about 2017 versus 2018? The white that we were just drinking, the La Serrana, is 2018. We're moving back in a year in vintage.
Yeah, honestly, as a winemaker, you try to do the best with every vintage. And when I look back over all these years, certain vintages stand out in and of themselves. And so, when you remember a year over everything else, that was a great vintage. So people have probably heard me say this a million times. 14 to date, I think, is our absolute best vintage. Prior to that, I would have said 10.
That's our argument. I still
12.
think 10 over 14, to be honest.
Yeah. So and one of the reasons why I think 14 was the greatest. And number one, I think they're going to be more ageable. So I think if you add, the 10's older right now, but I think in the long run the 14 is going to hold longer too. But anyway, panning out from there, we've had some really rough vintages. Like 9 was incredibly cold. And if you look at our 9s, they're much higher acidity across the boards. In fact, the La Serrana in 09, we actually released, and I pulled it back. I don't know if you remember. I think you might have been in the tasting room.
I was.
And I went up there one day, and I was like, this just isn't ready. We shouldn't have released it. So we actually released the 10 before the 9, right?
I remember.
Because the 10 was showing really beautifully.
Yep.
And then a year later, when the 10 was gone, then we released the 9. So the coldness and the acidity needed longer. But answering your question, 17 versus 18, more similar years than 9 and 10. 10 was like perfect in a lot of ways, dry, warm, but not hot. 9 was freezing. 17 and 18 were more similar. Both years were a little on the warm side. So generally that means we're going to probably pick things a little bit earlier because we don't want them to be flabby and fat and overly alcoholic.
Yeah.
Very, in a lot of ways, very similar vintages. And the main reason we're trying different vintages here and why the El Serrano is a 17 is we felt like the wine was a warm year. It was a pretty big wine, and we held it longer. And we released the La Serrana earlier after bottling, and we held the El Serrano a lot longer, just because we wanted to see it round out and integrate more. And we've been trying to do that more and more, hold wines in barrel longer. It's tough sometimes because it's a spatial concern. You run out of stuff. You have customers going, "Where's the wine?" And you're constantly feeling that pressure. But we held on to this El Serrano much longer in barrel, and I think it really benefited a lot.
Awesome nose. Lots of black and red fruit. I get this dark cherry, black cherry. This whole cola side.
And we make so many wines I can't remember it all. So 229 cases. Yum. So by the way, Syrah, Mourvedre, those are always the 2 grapes that go into El Serrano. And this year we put a little bit of Petit Syrah too.
And that fruit is all coming from our
this is all estate fruit. So Petit from House Mountain, Syrah from Colibri and Dos Padres, and the Mourvedre from Colibri too. I mean, to me, so Michael Bassler is visiting right now. He's a Burgundian guy, but he's really well schooled in wine in general. And I've been pouring our Syrahs and stuff for him. Last night I pulled out a 14 Counoise, and I got to impress the guy. But he's like, dude, if I were in the Rhone, I would think this was a wine made there.
Yeah,
which is a huge compliment from a guy like that.
Totally. Cola, cherry Coke.
Anise.
I get this anise, absolutely. This kind of berry cobbler, sweet, dark berry dessert kind of world. Something that I have always found in this wine that I think stands out in the 2017 is this graham cracker smell and taste. I think it comes across on both sides.
Just awesome.
A bit of this cocoa powder, a little vanilla bean. And the more it opens up, I feel like the cola is turning a touch more root beery, a little bit of like a sassafras.
So, again, kind of memories. The first place in California
Delicious.
where I tasted great Rhone wines was this place called Talbot's Creek. And Talbot's Creek, it is owned by the Perrin family, who owns Chateau Beaucastel, which is kind of like the seminal kind of Rhone house in Chateau de Pape. And that first time that I went down there to visit Chateau de Pape, I visited Beaucastel with my brother. We learned a ton of things. We hung out with the winemaker. It was the first time I ever tried straight Counoise, and saw the vineyards, which is really cool. But then
that probably changed the role of Counoise here.
No, but like our country hardly has any Counoise, and it's like one of my favorite grapes. I mean, bar none. I mean, between the rosés we make from it and the red wines and the way we use it in blends, I mean, down there it's a very minor grape. Very few people ever bottle it. And I actually think, I'm trying to think about it. I've had a straight Counoise, maybe from Gigal, I think. I don't even remember now. But anyway, make a long story short, this reminds me of the first time I went to Talbot's Creek, because there I am over in the Rhone, and I'm like, they're like, you have to go to our place in your country. So I went there, I met with the winemaker, we went around the vineyards, and they're like, do you want to try our blend? And it's called Esprit de Beaucastel. So homage to the motherland, right? At the time, they also had a nursery there. Our original Syrah vines that I planted here came from them. So we actually got vines from the Perrin family. They had a little nursery there, and it was pretty amazing. This transports me to the hills outside of Paso, where Talbot's Creek is. Walking around their vineyards with their winemaker. If you've never been to I'm actually not, Paso isn't my favorite AVA, but Talbot's Creek is amazing. Like it's a European kind of bastion amongst a lot of really intense, rich California style wine.
Yeah.
And they have lower alcohols, they have better acidity, they're food friendly. So if you guys have never been to Talbot's Creek, if you go to Paso, check them out. Awesome place.
Yeah, you know what? Something that I have always loved to think about with wine is this, when it gets bottled, essentially becomes a time capsule. It has claimed that time from the season of growing to that year of winemaking, and it retains that. Now, clearly the wine changes based off of closure and how you store it and so on. But whereas this is a time capsule, it is also this time machine. You open it, and all of a sudden it takes you all these different places. And I've kind of been taking the sensory side, and you've been taking the portal side of it. But I would say for me, when I open wines, I do exactly what you do as well. I love the sensory side of it, but my brain, I feel like the synapses for me connect a lot more memory, locations, experiences.
Smell and taste are so deeply seated in the unconscious,
Yeah.
Connects you.
Totally.
Well, and back to your point, I appreciate you playing that role, because obviously for my job, I'm constantly being the analytical wine guy. All of our tastings, all of our blending sessions, it's tear it apart, reduce, figure it out. What are the components? Is there bitterness? Is there too much alcohol? Is there the right amount of oak? Or should we need, blah, blah, blah. And it's an analytical process. A lot of times then I have to take that home with me and drink it outside of work. So I can be like, okay, what's this wine like when I'm not tearing it to shreds, which is my job, Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. Or you know what? This is a little bitter on the finish. Then I go back here and we figure out why it's bitter and
Yeah, well, that makes sense, because when we're doing that in the cellar, we are trying to dial this in more so as a product, I feel like, compared to showcasing our personal connection with it.
And a historical line too, because we can't have, the great thing about wine is it does change from year to year, but we don't want a classic blend that we make every year to be radically different, So we're also, as you know, because you join us all the time, we always taste previous vintages and be like, okay, are we in line? Like we usually feel like we're kind of there, but like let's go taste it just in case.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yep.
it's good to kind of have that place to throw the dart. You know, keep track of it. The lineage. And again, it's changing. I think one of the marks of a great wine is that it's not static, even in the like 10 or 15 minutes or the half hour, the hour, the 2 hours that you drink it. A great wine should go from that initial experience, like getting to know a person, back to the metaphor. You know, how many people have you met where you're like, oh, this person's so intriguing, but then an hour into it, you're like, oh, maybe I misjudged this situation. And other people who are like maybe quiet and reserved, and you're like, oh, maybe there's not a lot for me to enjoy here or get to know. And then an hour later, you're like, whoa, this person has so much depth, right? And wines are like that too.
Yeah.
You know? What you experience at first and an hour later can be radically different. And I think that makes wine great. You know?
So open the book. Don't just judge it by the cover.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And just because something looks beautiful, oh, it's pre-label or it's expensive or I got a lot high ratings, right? Ultimately, you got to dig in and figure it out for yourself. What does your gut tell you? You know, is this great or not? Does this move me? You know, just because Robert Parker, you know, what's funny is, with all due respect, because Parker and the Spectator enthusiasts have done great things for the world of wine, invariably, 90% of the time, 100-point wines I don't like.
Yeah.
I just don't, whatever. I don't know. And it's not because, oh, this is a 100-point wine, it's never going to impress me. I just, stylistically, they often don't appeal to me. And I've had plenty of 100-point wines. The wines that appeal to me are ones where I know the place and the people, and they connect me with something that's vital in this world. That's what makes a wine great.
I couldn't agree more about that. And that expands way outside of wine. I mean, even food and restaurants and I personally connect with this wine a ton because when I first started working within the wine industry, for Page Spring Cellar, which was early on for me, this was one of the wines that really pulled me in. It also is a wine that seemed to speak of this new place, this new home of mine, and represent this region here. I know I mentioned it earlier, but this graham cracker trait that I get is huge. And I feel like when I was first trying to establish my own understanding of Page Springs within Cornville, graham cracker is one of the traits that stands out. And I know I've tasted some of the DA Ranch, Dancing Apache Ranch wines, and they seem to have this, they're locally grown and locally made. And they have this graham cracker side that I absolutely love. And I feel like it is a representation of our unique region here in Page Springs.
You know what I was just thinking? Either I'm a lush or you're just doing more talking. maybe some of both.
While you're pouring, I'll jump into the palate.
I mean, it's funny because we have so many wines. I don't drink them all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have the same experience. I haven't had this wine in a while.
Yeah.
And I know we made this, but I'm sniffing this right now. I'm like, this wine is badass. It's got beautiful balance. It's complex. It immediately speaks of the varietal kind of triad that it's made from. It's really beautiful.
I drank a bottle of this about 2 nights ago and caught my kids watching me smell this wine for 25 minutes.
Closing your eyes, digging in.
My oldest is just like really questioning me. But yeah, what an absolutely beautiful wine. I feel like there is a lot of connections from aromatics to the palate here. And then there's some kind of standouts. I think the brambly blackberry kind of side that I get on the nose continues through the palate.
You know, it also has a really, from the Calibri components, in these years, because they're a little bit warmer, wines tend not to be as spicy in warmer years.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some physiological story about that, but we've definitely noticed colder years tend to be spicier, especially at Calibri, and warmer years less so. This year was a little on the warmer side, but I still get a little bit of that white pepper, dusty white pepper that's classic from the Calibri components of this, which is the Mourvedre or Mourvedre especially.
I get this apple peel, a bit of this tobacco, which I think is a touch of the spice I'm getting as well. The finish seems to bring back out a bit of this sweet. I get like a sweet fennel finish on the back end of it, which I love. The finish on that is delicious.
Yeah, I was telling you just this morning, a friend of mine has a bakery in Prescott called Pangea. I'm good. And just the other morning, I bought a loaf of bread from her that was apricot fennel seed. And I toasted it this morning, put some good quality butter, because butter's like, if you guys have never done a butter tasting, it sounds crazy. Buy 4 or 5 quality butters like Kerrygold, Plugra. If you've never had Plugra, fine Plugra. Then get some cultured butters that have actually had like a slight souring agent to them, and try them because they're radically different and they make a big difference. I put cultured butter on that this morning, and the fennel and the butter combination was just mind blowing. I was sitting there by myself eating a piece of toast as if I was drinking a glass of wine. I was like, oh my God, my eyes were closed, and like chomping on this thing and genuflecting, it was so
Your
great.
kids catch you doing that.
No, I'm the only one up at that hour, always. I get up before everybody. That's my personal
That is
time.
your thing. Yeah, you typically get up when I go to bed, and that is a weird thing, man.
I'm a farmer at heart, man. I
Yeah.
get up just before sunrise all the time. It's a little rough when you're up late drinking Burgundy.
What a delicious wine, man. I love this.
And it's got a lot of fruit, but I would say another thing that's very much our house style. I want to have fruit, but I don't want it to be just fruit. You know what I'm saying? Like there's got to be other things in there that balance it out, especially the savory components.
Yeah.
To me, this wine has a lot of savory components that I think those are the things that are evocative of the earth the most to me. The spice, the tobacco, the leafiness, the brambliness, all the things that remind me of the soil and drying leaves and wood and things that are more like earthbound. You know what I'm saying? Fruit to me is that like higher kind of resinous. It's up here, kind of more like direct and kind of there for you.
Right.
And then all this other earthy stuff is you have to dig a little more, and it's a little more subtle and sublime and kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
And this has tons of both of those, which is cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to have just one or the other. If you have wine with no fruit, it's like, yeah. And if you have wine that's all fruit, it seems kind of sophomoric.
Yeah.
If you have both, you got it all.
Right. And a bit about the production of this wine. This is made from our own vineyards. So we are picking this ourselves, bringing it in. We ferment this in open top fermentation bins. And the fermentation on this wine takes about 10 days or so. It then goes to a press where the plant matter is pressed away. And one of the standout things about the 2017 El Serrano is that it went into extended barrel aging. So a lot of our wines sit in barrel for about a year or so. This is one of the wines that we allow to continue beyond that in barrel. And this went for about a year and a half or so in barrel.
Yep.
And
and the reality is that we're a small winery. We have limited space, and it's a logistical challenge. If you have 400 barrels, which is what we have, and you say, oh, I'm going to age all of the reds for a whole nother year. What do you do when you have your next vintage? Where do the barrels come from? Where do they go?
Right.
There's all kinds of complexities like that. And so generally speaking, about, a tenth of our cellar, we have this one corner where our holdover, we call them holdover wines. The ones that we really think will benefit from a longer term aging go into that corner. And we all, those are the special, secretive kind of, oh, here's all the really good stuff.
Yeah.
But we really can't, unfortunately, right now, we really can't do much more holdover because we just don't have the space or the barrel capacity.
Yeah.
So
and Jeff Coley's asking about verticals on this wine, which I know we've done a handful of these before.
It's really fun. I'm not going to remember the exact vintage, but just about, a month ago, maybe a little, like in the early COVID days, this person reached out and was like, hey, you guys, I saw this thing in the library. We have a massive vertical of El Serrano. We're going to do this tasting. And lo and behold, they sent me this list, and they were missing a single bottle. I want to say it was 09, but I don't remember. I think it was 09. And I was like, oh, what a shame you don't have the 09. It was such an interesting year. So I went home and dug through my personal cellar, and I had a single 09 bottle. bottle, and I just shipped it to them because I was like, you guys have to have the 09 in that lineup. We have some short verticals, like 3 or 4 bottle verticals left in our library, and I think doing vertical tastings with a group of people is incredibly educational and fun. To be like, all right, here's like, and again, like you can get an 09 in there or a 14, or like back to like you liked 10.
Yep.
12 was a pretty damn good year too, a little bigger.
Yep.
But it's just, you can taste the climate during those years in our wines.
Yeah. And
Cold
those
year,
of
warm
you
year, in between.
Yeah, those of you who don't know what a vertical is and what we're referencing, it's essentially when you open and taste the same wine from vintage to vintage. And I think really, to call it a vertical, I think you only need 2 vintages, but you could have a vintage that would be 5 years or beyond. And I think that they have to be consecutive years for it to technically be called a vertical.
I don't think so. I mean, the two terms, vertical and horizontal.
Yep.
Horizontal is like, we might do a horizontal. Okay, no more wine for me. Horizontal vineyard tasting. So you might do 2018 Colibri Syrahs.
Yep.
Right? And so a bunch of different Syrahs across the same vintage.
Yep.
A vertical has to have a progression of vintages. I've never heard, it may be true, that they have to be consecutive because not all wineries bottle every year. Correct. For one. So
yep.
my guess would be that it just has to be progressive.
Yeah.
And it could be like you said, 2-year, 3-year, 10-year.
Right. Yeah. And verticals are one of the best ways to showcase the difference of vintage. And vintage is obviously such a huge part of wine. We're constantly talking about what year this came from. But when we say, oh, this 2016, this, without having a reference of what made 16 different, you're just kind of trusting us, or we're trusting somebody else on that. And doing a vertical, even with just 2 different vintages, is a really great way to create an association with your different years that are drastically different based off of weather or
it's large. I mean, it's a study in climate,
your environment.
Yeah. I mean, you could certainly argue and it'd be true that our cultural practices adapt each year, but I would say people talk about soils all the time. I think soils are really important, and certainly like Burgundy, like Burgundians, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay producers talk about soils all the time, but they're usually talking about soils within a relatively homogeneous climate. Okay. So of course, if you guys are all in the same climate, of course you're going to look for the nuances that associate with soils, right? But climate is clearly the macro variable well before soils, because a warm year and a cold year, a warm year and a hot year are going to create such radically different wines. I believe personally that trumps soils. Soils are nuances within climate. So it's like in that inverted pyramid, climate's up here, then soils, and then cultural practices too.
Yeah.
And some people will beat me up for that, but I'm sticking to my guns because I'm an ecologist and climate is huge.
I dig it, man. I'm in.
All right.
Do you maybe want to tell everybody about our drop program and this virtual tasting world and where it's going from here?
Yeah, I mean, as we kind of head towards a wrap up here, obviously the coolest thing about this is that we're tasting, hopefully most of you out there have the same wines in front of you. And it's that unifying experience that's bringing us together. You're drinking the wine, we're drinking the wine, we're having this relationship digitally here. The challenge, of course, is it's too hot for us to ship right now. All of our shipments go through Phoenix. So whether you're in Chicago, like my dad and his partner, or somebody in Boston, like my stepdad and my mom, my brother in Virginia, we can't ship you wines because even if it's cool where you are, it still goes through Phoenix and it'll get cooked, right?
Right.
So what we've been doing, at least in Arizona, is every week up to noon on Wednesday, we'll take orders, and we have 5 drop points in Phoenix. We're sending a van down, and you can order the wines, and we'll bring them to one of 5 spots in the 5 major kind of areas within Phoenix. So go check out our website. So don't assume that we can't get you these wines. Like, we have an awesome rosé tasting coming up that is just amazing. So
next week, right?
Next week
from now.
And so, The cutoff though is noon on each Wednesday, and the deliveries on Thursday evening. Okay, so just remember that, because I think it's a really cool opportunity, and it's just another way that we're adapting to try to get people wine. You could of course come up here and get them too. We're open now, like we were saying earlier. But if you can't make it up, we have a guy coming down, and he'll be wearing a mask and doing all the same protocol, and it's just like, bam, get your wine and go. It's that simple.
Yeah. It's unfortunately it is specific to the Phoenix area, but that is by far the mass population that is close to us. We're out in the kind of the middle of nowhere, and Phoenix is a major city, obviously.
Yeah, you guys in Yuma, we're really sorry. You guys in Kingman.
So as we start to wrap things up, what I would love is for us to take any questions from you guys at home, and I'll start to scroll back through and see if there's anything we missed. In the meantime, if you don't mind taking our first question, which we touched on early, but I know we have new people following of where we are at,
okay,
where we're tuning in from.
So we're at Page Spring Cellars, and my wife Gail runs our massage and yoga program. And so we're in the massage sala. So this is the massage space here. And if you tuned in late, you might have missed it. But basically, because of lighting, we've got to shoot against the wall here. What we really wanted to do is shoot through the picture window where you can see the whole vineyard behind us. So the other thing is that literally the spring is flowing underneath this room. So if you were getting a massage in here, or a couples massage, the masseuses would open up this little door, and all the water flowing into underneath us would fill up this room with the sound of flowing water. It's just an amazing place.
Yeah, we gave everyone a bit of that view. Let's see if we can get our shit together enough to do that.
Do it again.
Yeah, it's a big change in lighting as we open things up. But Nick, behind the scenes, if you don't mind showing everyone what he's talking about with where we're coming from. Again, we're tuning in from our massage sala. A very special place, and the view is hard to beat from this intimate space. Right now, the sun's setting, and the cottonwoods are sending out all their seeds, and
can see the old Syrah we planted, and all the new plantings as well.
Jeff Coley's asking if the new members area is done. It's getting really, really close. It should be any day now.
I'm thinking next weekend we'll have it open.
By next weekend.
Yeah.
We almost shot from in there, although it's now that we're open to the public, there's a lot of people around, and the closure is not completely finished, but it's right there, and it is going to be one of the best spots on our property.
It's all glass. I mean, it's like you're floating
floor to ceiling glass, and you're looking through ash trees and palm trees and looking straight over top of our estate vineyard.
And you guys, I'm sorry, Jeff. You especially, I'm sorry this has taken so long. There's so many weird things but we're there. We're finally gonna open.
Yes. Let me just keep scrolling through here. Quick question about risk of screw caps. And this question arose as we were talking about our synthetic sustainable corks that we're transitioning to from natural cork.
Now, do you say risk of screw caps?
Yeah, risk of screw caps, or maybe just a minute on why we aren't going there at this point?
Yeah, for me, well, number one, I mean, there's just a real practical aspect of this, which is that we have a corker and we don't have a capper, right?
Yep.
Call me romantic, but I really love the sound of a cork coming out of a bottle. I think screw cap is a great technology. And in fact, the discs, one of the cool things that is, the evolution of screw caps is that it has very little to do these days with the actual screw cap itself. It's the disc underneath the cap that seals on the top of the bottle that is the true technology. And just like if you had tuned in the past, I talked about how they're starting to engineer these at different densities so you can change the aging rates of wines, which I think is brilliant. The reality is that screw cap discs are going that same route. So in theory, down the road here, you should be able to put different discs underneath the screw cap and age your wine differently. You could seal it perfectly. Like maybe you want to keep something ultra fresh, like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Right. Maybe you want it to age more. Like I think this La Serrana is going to benefit from age. It's a little fatter, more honeysuckle, honey, nutty notes.
Yeah. You
could make a call and put it. So I have personally have no issues with screw caps, except that the sound of crack versus brook is like night and day. I'm sorry.
It
It's
is.
a little piece of history.
It
you
is. I completely agree.
Everybody in the room looks around like, when champagne cork pops in a restaurant, doesn't everybody look? That is an important thing. It's huge. So.
A question from Terrence Glomski, who's tuning in from Chicago. He says it's 49 degrees there. Is it 49 degrees there?
No, it's 149 degrees in this room right now. We turned off the AC because obviously we didn't want to have the background noise. And I've been looking over at you and I'm going, okay, am I going to see a bead of sweat come down? And the same with me, probably, right?
Absolutely.
No, it's right now outdoors during the day. The peak temperature was probably mid to high 80s. Light breeze it's actually absolutely beautiful when you're not in the small enclosed room without the AC.
Yeah, it has been gorgeous around here, Terrence and Terry. You know, I'm not from the desert, and I feel like temperature is not the gauge of how you would survive outside. It's the intensity of the sun. Yeah. You know, and I feel like the shade versus sun exposure out here, and I feel like this is the weather where you can actually be in the sun a little bit, and that's going to change in the next month or so.
Well, one of the great things about this place is we have some of the biggest deciduous trees around, so we have tons of shade. We have the river, and I'm sorry it's 49 in Chicago. It's probably windy too. The last time I was in Chicago, Gail and I were there, and Gail's like, she was like getting blown down the block with this icy rain, and we got stuck there because it was when Southwest Trump basically said you can't fly those certain planes. It was like maybe a 737.
Yep.
And so we ended up being there on St. Patrick's Day for like 4 extra days in a hotel in the rain.
Yeah.
It was brutal. It was brutal.
Now it might sound kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, not that. I mean, Chicago's a great city, but.
Michael Chavez is asking if we can explain a bit about the argon nitrogen blend spray. Okay. Am I taking 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, just in a nutshell, you guys. We sent that along with a lot of the packs because let's say you're sitting at home with these 2 bottles. You know, I mean, obviously I'd be psyched for you guys to drink all the wine and then come back and get more, but maybe you're not going to drink it all. You have to get up early in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. And the oxygen, which is all around us, it's a small percentage of the atmosphere, is incredibly reactive, and it affects wines quickly and profoundly. Sometimes, like this bigger red wine here, probably you don't need to spray it, you guys, if you're going to drink it again tomorrow. But I would the white. And by spraying that in there, you're going to coat the surface of that wine with argon, which is heavier than atmosphere, and it will protect the wine from the oxygen that's in the atmosphere, and it'll slow its aging. I think with white wines, it's particularly important. If you're going to keep a red wine longer, I think it's also a great way to do it. But once you put it in, you can't move the wine around, okay? So the best thing is to find where it's going to be, spray it, and cork it, and just wait. I mean, technically, you don't have to cork it even, but it's probably a good idea. If you do move it, it's got to stay stable for a while and let that argon settle back in. But it's way better if you read the directions on the bottle, cork it, and just leave it. And it'll extend the life of that wine by days, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Christine Childry is asking if we release our wines ready to drink. She is a wine club member and is saying that our newsletters will reference aging from there. What I would recommend is always start from the vintage on the bottle, because even though you may think that we're releasing these wines as we bottle them, it's not the case. We are releasing them when we feel like they are ready to drink, although aging wouldn't hurt specifically on a lot of our reds. And if you happen to be a member within our wine club, we are listing out suggested general ideas, and there's a lot of variables there as for how you store your wine and beyond. But
Mike, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
The other thing is, as you guys know, one of our mantras is trust your palate. In fact, we trademarked that because we think it's so important.
Right.
Part of the reason I've always had a little bit of reticence about telling people how long to age their wines, because I think it's partially subjective. One of my first jobs at David Bruce in Santa Cruz Mountains, it was a tough one. Nobody wanted to do this, believe it or not. I tasted through every wine in our library, and I basically rated them, and we decided what was dead and what was amazing.
Yeah.
And I developed a very keen interest and love for older wines, especially Chardonnays. Some of the best wines were like, I was there in the 90s and I was tasting early 80s Chardonnays and they were blowing my mind.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I'll add is part of it is you need to decide for yourself whether you like younger or older wines. Younger wines are generally going to be more fruity and more edgy and more defined. I mean, and older ones are going to be more nutty and sherried and complex and everything in between. So you've got to decide what you like too.
Yeah, there's essentially a curve where wine gets better, and we are starting that curve when we feel like they are ready to drink. But the ageability of a wine basically sends a curve upward to its apex and to its peak, and shortly after that, it falls off.
It's a bell curve.
And it spoils, yeah.
And the top of the bell can be wider or shorter depending on the wine.
Yeah, and hitting the apex of that curve is what you would prefer, but knowing when that is the real question that's very hard to answer. And with Page Spring Cellars and our library wines, what we actually do is we tap into our library every single year and do an assessment of the ageability of what we've designated into our library. And then when we see that apex coming on these wines, then we release those to the public. And
we do that blind, by the way. We do it completely blind.
Yeah.
And we just like, okay, every year, is this wine getting better than the year before? We reference the previous year.
Yep.
And then we move them over to the library sales.
So before we close out all the way, just trying to get everyone's questions here. I have actually never heard of Stelvin Lux capsules. Have you?
Stelvin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Stelvin. Yeah. Is
what's the context?
Rubino is asking, and he says, I don't know any Arizona wineries using Stelvin Lux capsules. They're gorgeous. What's your opinion on Stelvin Lux?
I mean, Stelvin is one of the seminal kind of screw cappers. I mean, I don't know what Ken Callaghan screw caps his wines now. I don't remember offhand what he's using.
Yeah.
I thought they were Stelvins. I don't know if they were Stelvin Luxes, but I mean, the other cool thing about caps, screw caps, and the collars that come with them is there's a whole nother surface to do design work on.
Yeah.
And you got Ruben, in a nutshell, to me, without going into great detail, pairing the right closure with the right wine is the key. It doesn't matter whether it's natural cork or synthetic cork or different kinds of synthetic cork or different kinds of screw caps. A winemaker needs to think through a pairing between their closure and their understanding of their wine. Some closures retard aging, some speed it, and everything in between. So it's really more for me about that knowledge and that making a pairing between the two. It's like food and wine, closure and wine, One more.
I'll bring that up for 1 second. I got people asking what soccer clubs I follow in Germany. So Aaron,
family members.
That's Aaron Brown from up in Oregon, and I'll text
Aaron
him.
and Lacey. Hey guys, glad you're joining us.
These guys as always.
Eat a pock for me, will you? I miss that place. One of the greatest Thai restaurants in our country.
Still haven't been, man.
So good.
I'll make it one day. On that note.
Cheers, man.
Final sip. Happy to drink with you guys. Yeah. Very happy to have you joining us from home. We'll be tuning back in live at 5:30 a week from today. So the following Saturday,
rosé all day.
We are drinking rosé all day. 2 very special wines that I'm very excited to drink with you guys, and hopefully you can tune in. Hope to see you guys on property soon, and if not, hope to see you live on camera here in about a week. So tuning out.
Cheers.
Great to hang with you, man.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, thanks, man.
Absolutely. Cheers.